Welcome back, everybody, to the Haunted Beard. My name is Jake. So, as I said, I wanted to officially conclude my entire Nightmare on Elm series of reviews by giving you my official ranking of all 9 movies in this series. I'll let you know right from the get-go, there's going to be a couple hot takes in here, a couple unpopular opinions, but like every list, this is just mine. It doesn't mean it's the right one. It's just mine. Let me know down in the comments how you rank this thing. I would love to hear from you. Also, too, sort of my criteria, I guess, for ranking these is pretty simple. It's basically just which one of these would I most want to watch right now. If I had to put one in, that would be, the first one would be number 1, all the way down to the bottom. This would be the last thing that I would want to rewatch. Also, I'm not going to go super in-depth with my thoughts here, but I have a full review for all 9 of these, and I will provide a link down in the description in case you want to watch those. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So, starting off at number 9, the absolute worst of the worst, and that is, for me, Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare. And not only is this the worst of the Nightmare on Elm series, pretty clearly and obviously, but this is honestly, I think, one of the worst films I have seen in quite some time. This thing is truly a sight to be seen. You kind of have to see it to believe it, how bad it is. It is unbelievably bad. The main issue that I have with it is just the tone, and Freddy Krueger has basically become this slapstick Looney Tunes villain. He's kind of a parody of himself. The tone and the humor is just awful and takes away any sort of suspense or scares. I think if I could show you one scene from this movie that kind of perfectly sums up the entirety of this thing, it would be Spencer's kill with Freddy playing the video game. That scene is so completely outrageous and ridiculous and just goofy. It's just, again, it's unbelievably bad. You really can't believe how terrible it is until you see it. And it is shockingly, shockingly bad. So, Freddy's Dead, I plan on never watching this thing ever again. And it will be at number 9 until forever. Next up at number 8 is A Nightmare on Elm Street remake from 2010. And really, overall, this thing, it just pales in comparison in every possible conceivable way to the original. It does everything worse than the original movie and doesn't make any improvements or any significant changes to do anything different. It is dull and lifeless and boring and just unmemorable and uninspired. Our lead character, Nancy here, her character here is just worthless and lifeless, and there's just nothing to her, and she just has no energy and no skill and no edge, and just not a very well-written character, a terrible homage in terribly way to just honor the original Nancy, who is great. And just the kills, too, also pale in comparison to the original. The CGI here that is used is just atrocious and dates this thing horribly. And it is just not a pleasant experience pretty much all around. So, Nightmare on Elm Street, the 2010 remake, sits at number 8. Coming in at number 7 is Nightmare on Elm Street 2, Freddy's Revenge. And look, this thing isn't terrible, but I wouldn't really call it good. This one is almost kind of its own separate thing in a way. It's a Nightmare on Elm Street movie that has Freddy Krueger, but it doesn't really operate according to the traditional, typical, pre-established Nightmare on Elm Street rules. It kind of just marches to the beat of its own drum, and I don't really like the majority of the decisions it makes to, again, kind of completely disregard the rules that are established in the original film. With Freddy, the whole thing with him taking over Jesse as possessing him and the sleepwalking stuff just gets weird and confusing, and I go into more details about that in my review for this, but there's just a lot of confusion there as far as what Freddy's MO is and how it works in with his possession of Jesse. And then they bring Freddy out into the real world, again, just completely disregarding the rules set up by the original, which I don't think is a very good choice as well. Most of the kills for me are not very memorable. I do think there are a couple bright spots. I do think Jesse's performance overall is pretty good, and I think there is one pretty good highlight and standout kill scene, and that is Ron's kill, where Freddy busts out of Jesse's chest, and we get a pretty nice, some good practical effects, and just a pretty gnarly, bloody kill. So, like I said, the movie is not a complete nightmare. It's not great. It's got a couple decent aspects to it, but overall, uh, not one of the better films in this franchise. Coming in at number 6, and like I said, there's going to be some unpopular opinions here, so buckle up your seatbelts, because number 6 for me is Wes Craven's A New Nightmare. And I know a lot of people will have that higher towards their list, but this is just my list. So the main issue that I have with this film, and I talked about this in more depth in my review for it, and I feel bad again saying it, but my main issue is the performance from the child actor Dylan. I just feel like his performance really hinders the movie. He's used so much in the suspenseful and intense scenes and the scare scenes, but his performance is just not very good, and it really hinders those sequences in terms of their overall effectiveness and how scary they can be. A lot of his performance comes across as just unintentionally funny, and so unfortunately, again, I hate to say it, it just hurts the movie for me. I also think, too, that this movie it just feels that it's missing some atmosphere, and I just really miss the over-exaggerated, over-the-top atmosphere of the dream worlds that we get in a lot of the other Nightmare on Elm movies, and this movie is lacking in that. And so those are really the main reasons. Again, if you want more depth, you can watch my individual review for it, but that is number 6, Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Next up at number 5 is Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master, and for me, the vast majority of this thing is pretty terrible. The acting, the performances all the way around, for the most part, are not great. I think it just makes some bad story directions by completely eliminating all the Dream Warriors from Part 3 in the first third of the film, more or less, which is just really kind of a bummer. Also, this really starts introducing more of the humor aspect and one-liners to Freddy, which I'm just really not a fan of. You get the whole sequence where Freddy puts on the sunglasses and now he becomes cool, and it's all about delivering these snappy, witty one-liners every time he kills someone, which I'm just not a fan of at all. I don't really think the comedy works here at all. However, the movie does have a little bit of saving grace, as I think the final 20 minutes are actually pretty good, and so it helps save this movie a little bit. What mainly saves it is Debbie's kill. This is, I think, one of the best kill sequences in the entire franchise. Just a fantastic kill. It's gnarly, great practical effects. They bring in this sort of creature-like aspect to it as she turns into this bug insect thing, and it's just nasty in a good way, and just really gnarly and different, and I think it just stands out as one of the best kill sequences in this entire franchise. Also, too, I think the finale of Freddy getting killed is pretty cool as well. Just the whole visual and, again, practical effects of him getting killed, where he's got all the souls just trying to protrude out of him, and he's sitting there with all these souls, and just the practical effects there are just really great. And so, like I said, the majority of this film I am not a big fan of, but that last 20 minutes is the saving grace, and I think there's some pretty solid stuff in the last 20 minutes of this film. So that is number 5. All right, next up, coming in at number 4 is, here we go, another unpopular opinion, Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. I know a lot of people have this towards the very back and the very worst of their list, but Nightmare on Elm 5 was a bit of a pleasant surprise for me. There was a handful of stuff about it that I actually quite enjoyed and had a pretty decent time with overall. I think we get some really solid atmosphere here with the dream sequences. It works really well for me. I think the choice to have Freddy attack Alice through her unborn baby is really bold and disturbing, as we get that sequence where she goes to the doctor's office to get the ultrasound, and man, especially if you're a parent, that is just dark and disturbing and scary and all the above. And I think it just is really memorable and stands out as a highlight of the movie for me. I also really like the kill sequences here, and I mentioned in my review, and I understand the criticism because I think in a way they feel like they don't really belong in a Nightmare on Elm Street movie. But I just really like that they tried to do something different. And I think the kills, especially of Greta's and Mark's, are just unique and fresh and different. And I just appreciate the ambition there that they went for something different. The ending for me is a bit of a mixed bag. I like the visual aspect of the whole kind of crazy stairs sequence. That works really well for me, and I like that creativity there. But as far as the whole conclusion with Jacob becoming kind of the mini Freddy and just the whole development and everything that unfolds in the very finale, it's just really weird and confusing and doesn't make a whole lot of sense and doesn't work very well. However, with all that being said, I still think overall the positives outweigh the negatives, and so that's what sits at number 4 for me, Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. Next up at number 3 is the spin-off, good old Freddy vs. Jason. And like I said in my review, this is just big, dumb fun. I think the movie is self-aware enough that the movie knows what it's trying to do, and that's just give us the most over-the-top, ridiculous, outrageous craziness in terms of humor and action and gory, bloody slasher kills from two horror icons, and for the most part, it does just that. A couple scenes that stick out for me. I really like the scene at the cornfield where Jason comes out of the cornfield on fire and just lays waste to all the party goers. That's a whole lot of fun. I also like the whole finale sequence where we finally get our showdown between Freddy and Jason. Just a lot of good slasher, bloody, gory violence to be had there as these two legends go at it. And so, like I said, it's big, dumb fun, but I think it's entertaining, and overall, I have a pretty fun time with it. Okay, so we are down to the final two, and these last two are pretty typical and battle it out for the top spot on most people's list. But for me, my number 2 is Nightmare on Elm Street 3 Dream Warriors. And overall, this is just a really solid Nightmare on Elm Street movie. The atmosphere is great. The dream sequences work really well and are just creative. And I just love the practical effects, particularly the whole snake-like Freddy. And I like the little stop-motion animation Freddy we get leading up to Philip's kill, which, by the way, the kill sequences in this are just fantastic. Philip's kill in particular is just brutal and gnarly and one of the best kills in the entire franchise. Jennifer's kill as well is really great. I love that they brought back Nancy here, and I just love her character and how she plays into just as the doctor role and just helping these kids and stuff like that. I really like that as well. I think the whole finale is pretty solid as well. I like the hallway of mirrors sequence, and overall, you can't go wrong with Nightmare 3 Dream Warriors. It's just a really solid Nightmare movie. But of course, number 1 for me, and in my review of this, I also said that this is one of my favorite movies, and that is the original Nightmare on Elm Street from Wes Craven, 1984. Look, this thing is a absolute classic. Pretty much every decision they make in this from a creative directing perspective works for me, and I think is just the right decision. I think the kill of Tina is one of the great slasher kills of all time in any horror film. I absolutely love it. Glenn's kill as well is really good. The character of Nancy is fantastic, and she's just great, and one of the best final girls of all time, in my opinion. And look, I will continue to watch this thing for years to come. It is one of my absolute favorites. Everything about it works really well for me, and I absolutely love it. The original from 1984, Nightmare on Elm Street, sits atop the rest of the pile at number 1. Well, that officially concludes my Nightmare on Elm Street ranking. Thank you so much for watching, but hit me up down in the comments. I would really like to hear from you. How do you rank the series? What's your favorite movie? Let me know down below. Thank you so much for watching. I greatly appreciate it, and we will see you next time on The Haunted Beard.